Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Hello there! As we venture forward, we wanted to offer you a dose of nostalgia from Something Scary for the next upcoming weeks. For those of you who have been following us for a while, you might recall these compilations we used to put together. Well, we decided to bring them back. We hope you enjoy these scary compilations.
At just 10 years old, I found myself in yet another psychiatrist's office. The third one, to be exact. This time, the doctor had me sketch and take Rorschach tests. Desperate to understand what was going on in my young mind, but he came to the same conclusion as everyone else: childhood schizophrenia. I initially dismissed the concept, yet the haunting imagery of my past continued to replay in my mind. There was no denying that girl creeping into my room had to be real. I had been safe for months, but the time I most feared was now here. Another loose tooth. I didn't touch it. I even stopped eating so nothing would shake it, because I never wanted that demon to come near me again. I woke up that terrible night and I looked at the clock. 3:33 a.m. I'm not sure what woke me, but I rolled over and pulled my comforter closer to my chest. But then I heard it, the buzzing sound like a chainsaw in the distance. I pressed my pillow against my ears to quiet the noise, but it only became louder. As I sat up in my bed, a wave of dizziness hit me, and I became aware of the growling sensation in my stomach. Maybe I'm just hungry, I thought to myself, and I decided to slip out for a midnight snack. But as I heard the door slowly creak open, I knew it would be best to lay back down quickly. After all, if my mom caught me awake, I'd surely be in trouble. All of a sudden, an overpowering stench attacked my nostrils. As the buzzing grew louder, it almost seemed to muffle all other sounds. I pretended to be asleep, hoping that whatever it was would go away. The shadow slithered across my room as I turned just enough to catch a blurry glimpse of it. I clenched my eyes and hoped not to scream. The irritating buzz was nearby. The creature was probably right above me. And then suddenly, the pungent stench of a sour odor made me gasp, as if a dead rat was left cooking in the sun. My eyes were burning. I didn't want to turn over, but I had to see what was causing the rotten stench.
Mine, all mine, shiny, pretty pearls,
a voice whispered, eerily resembling that of a young child, sending shivers down my spine. Slowly, I rolled back over to catch a glimpse. In the faint gleam of my nightlight, she appeared before me, a ghastly pale girl. Her skin looked blood-drained, hued a grayish blue. She was tiny, like a small child, and covered in crusty reddish-brown bloodstains. The stains matted the tips of her short pink hair and bangs. She had a sick smile, her lips curling at the corners as she cackled and giggled. Her wings were scraggly and torn, yet somehow she managed to carry herself across my room, buzzing in my face. I couldn't scream. The air was so thick around me, it was making me woozy. I knew exactly who this was. The girl of my nightmare from months ago. She pounced, straddling me and pulling a pair of faded pink pliers out from behind her back. She screeched a horrific high pitch. Her voice dripped with a sense of stress and urgency. But while she was screaming, I saw something even worse. Her mouth, it wasn't really a mouth, more of a rotting black maw. She had barely any teeth, and those that remained in the void were misplaced, like a patchwork nightmare. I struggled against her grip, knocking her against my bedside lamp, turning it on. Her image became clear in the light. There was a crown on top of her head, jeweled with teeth, patterned like macabre diamonds. Rotting flesh and unknown gunk rained from her mouth like a mist. I understood the scent of death and decay lingering around her. It was worse than ever. We struggled against each other's grips for an agonizing amount of time. I was crying out for help, but no one was listening. I flung her off my bed and onto the floor. She ripped me down with her. My head slammed against my bedpost, and fear gripped me. She dug her stained nails into my skin, shoving the pliers into my mouth. They tasted of rust and blood. She wrapped them around the one loose baby tooth. "Mine," she snarled, and kept repeating it with a growing intensity. Her voice tinged with excitement. The moment my tooth tore from the gum, blinding pain shredded through me, causing me to gag. As my vision went white, the pain vanished, but my body was left in shock, quickly falling numb. And after that, everything went black. Waking hours later, everything looked completely normal. The house was still. The only thing out of place was a small pile of silver coins on the floor and the unbearable painful hole in my jaw. I couldn't possibly have imagined the degree of excruciating pain, but I had no proof it had happened. No one will believe that she was a monster, and I'll just be labeled insane again. But I'm not. I've seen her. She haunts me, the evil Tooth Fairy.
Poe originally opens his story with this. The Red Death had long devastated the country. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the madness and the horror of blood. The Red Death is what it was called. It was a mysterious disease that consumed victims quickly with sharp pains, dizziness, and profuse bleeding from every orifice and pore on the body. Faces stained red in the clutches of death would reach out, but doing so would latch onto death's next victim. Ways to outrun it were growing scarce. Prospero's sanctuary was a retreat in a ranch estate. It boasted that it lay far from the Red Death that was spreading. For the right price and/or amount of followers, those who held high positions, who held old money, or influenced and entertained could qualify for the luxurious commune. But only those who were sure through thorough testing they didn't carry the Red Death could enter, or were rich enough to where the testers would look the other way. After all, people like that surely couldn't catch what the common folk had. Led by tech innovator Princeton Prospero, his state-of-the-art sanctuary invited his many guests to ride out the plague in a space filled with lavish amenities. State-of-the-art gym equipment, fireside chats to build community, and of course, parties. Their lives would no longer be disrupted by the plague. The strict guidelines of separation were for the general public, not for those at Prospero's sanctuary. They were above following such restrictions. Sanctuarians were equipped with Prospero's state-of-the-art smartwatches, keeping them up to date on their vitals, on activities, and most importantly, the percentage spread of the Red Death around the country. When the percentage went down to 0, they could leave. To keep his guests distracted, Prospero planned a great festival to celebrate his ingenuity in protecting his sanctuary. A great masked ball was held in the great ballroom, with an unveiling of masks scheduled at midnight. The decorations were illuminated by stained glass windows lined in red, an ironic decoration. Within, there was wine, beauty, and security. Without was the Red Death. That night, masked guests would pause to uneasily look at their watches. The smartwatch alerts were like a knell. Numbers of deceased without were growing, and for a moment, an air of stillness would pass over the guests. Then, with mirth and laughter, they'd go back to drinking and dancing under their masked guises as the midnight hour drew near. Then, cutting through the party, a sound went off on some people's wrists. Spotted here and there, echoing through the hall, alarms flashing red from their smartwatches. Worried, Prospero realized that was a different alert, one that meant contagion.
Impossible. It must be a glitch in the system,
he reasoned. While puzzling that out, he heard horrified murmurs of a masked figure among the party. It had appeared and now passed through every area of the sanctuary, with no one daring to stop it. Did you see their mask? So tasteful and ghastly. What's going on? What does this mean? Who is that? Where did they come from? Just then, the crowd parted in front of Prospero, and there it was. A tall and gaunt figure with a vermilion red visage that distastefully resembled the faces of the corpses outside. Rage-filled, Prospero demanded,
Who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery?
his roar bringing the party to a halt. Head to toe in scarlet, the figure moved forward. Horrified, people backed away, more and more of their wrists sounding and flashing red. Those that wrists had sounded off first were now stricken with dizziness and had begun to bleed from their faces. Screams sounded as more wrist alarms went off and people scattered. Prospero waved his master control, sealing doors tightly in the sanctuary. Glass panes on doors were marked by bloody hands, screaming for escape as they succumbed to the disease that one or more of them had invited inside with them, thereby infecting all the rest. Prospero walked through halls, sealing off the dying, and all the while, silently following him was the tall red figure, following all the way back to the end of the black ballroom. There, they met in a final confrontation. As his smartwatch rang out the hour of midnight, the failed genius leaped forward, ripping his mask off. And as Prospero too was stricken, and his vision filled with the red of his own blood, he gaped at the visage of the pestilent entity. With a cry, Prospero realized they had done this to themselves. No amount of money put one above the Red Death. His own hubris had called it quickly to him, and to the many that had smugly followed him. The world outside would continue to heed the warnings, staying away and in small groups. With lesser means, yes, but they would outlast it. While he, in his glorified, decimated Eden, then dropped dead.
In the countryside of Ardenvale, on the outskirts of Beckborough, there was a family dairy farm that fell upon desperate times. To save the farm, the father sent his eldest daughter, Gertrude, to sell the family mule at the nearest village. After a half-day's travel, Gertrude arrived in the village of Beckborough. She made her way to the marketplace and began asking around. The merchants waved her off or made joke offers on her mule. It was almost enough for her to give up and go home, until she met a charming man in a feather cap. "That's a good, strong animal you have," the man said. "You deserve a good price for a mule like this." He made Gertrude a generous offer, even more than she expected, and traded her mule for a full bag of silver. Cheerful with her fortune, Gertrude skipped and jangled to a building named the Baker's Inn. She decided she could afford a room for the night before embarking home the next morning. The inn was warm and lively, with customers lined up to purchase dinner pies from the bakery counter. Gertrude reached the counter and she met the welcoming eyes of the baker. She eagerly placed a piece of silver on the counter and requested a pie and room for the night. Smiling, the baker placed the silver on his scale, but at that moment, his smile changed to a frown. He grabbed Gertrude by the wrist. "Where did you get this? You can get in a lot of trouble buying goods with plated counterfeits." Gertrude looked down at her bag of silver, confused, and cold reality settled in. She began to weep. "I didn't know. I thought the silver was real, I swear," she pleaded. "The man in the feather cap tricked me. I sold my family mule to him, and now I can never show my face at home." The baker felt bad for losing his temper. "Oh, you poor child. That is not fair." He handed her a pie from the rack and gave her a table to sit and eat. With cheeks still moist, she ate the pie. It was hot and filled with a delicious, very tender beef filling. It was no wonder the bakery had people lined up earlier. It was evening now, and Gertrude had nowhere she could go. But the baker had a proposition. "Young miss, you saw how busy it got in here today. How would you like to work for me? You can live in the spare room and parcel money home to your family." Gertrude was speechless. She hugged the baker, and after he showed her the room, he explained her duties. She would clean, tend the bakery counter, and prepare the guest rooms. Gertrude would have a chance to save the family farm after all. She fell fast asleep. Later that night, she sprung awake to the sound of blood-curdling screams echoing through the walls of the inn. Was this a nightmare? What could she do? Gertrude clutched the sheets to cover herself and laid scared for a long time. But eventually, the screaming ceased, and she drifted back to sleep. At sunrise, Gertrude came downstairs and welcomed a knight in noble silks with a sword at his hip. When the baker came out of the larder, Gertrude asked if he had heard the unsettling screams the previous night. "Oh, what you heard last night," the baker began ominously, "is the inn's worst kept secret. We have a ghost problem. We're lousy with them, in fact. If I'd known better, I wouldn't have built my bakery in a haunted inn. They're a nuisance, yes, but they're harmless, I promise." This statement prompted laughter from the knight across the room. "Sounds like a hoax. I've seen all there is to see. Witches, fairies, redcaps, and trolls, but never a ghost," he said. "Well, tonight, maybe you will," derided the baker. The baker sent Gertrude to prepare the knight's room, and after a long day of sweeping and selling pies, she sat down to a tasty pie of her own. Later that night, she awoke to more terrible screams. But now, instead of being scared, she was just annoyed. She buried her head in her pillow and filled her mind with positive thoughts. Decadent meat pies, her family, the farm. And with that, she drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Gertrude couldn't wait to ask the knight how he slept. But the knight was nowhere to be found. The baker pulled a fresh rack of pies from the oven. "What happened to the knight?" Gertrude asked the baker. "Oh, him?" the baker said dismissively. "He was summoned to an errand for his lord and took off in the night. Care for a pie?" This answer didn't sit well with Gertrude, and the lack of sleep was beginning to wear on her. The rest of the day, customers came in droves, and she was able to distract herself by selling pies. But night came too soon. To Gertrude's surprise, the inn remained silent. Somehow the silence was more unsettling. What, did the ghost decide to take a day off? She got up and crept over to the guest room where the knight stayed before. There was nothing remarkable. It was just empty. She thought she had seen enough until she noticed an odd seam in the wall. She pulled it open to reveal a secret compartment. There, in a pile, laid a hoard of belongings: silks, swords, shoes, and armor. Every instinct told Gertrude it was time to leave. She rushed quietly down the hall, rounded the corner, and then covered her mouth in shock. The baker blocked the doorway to her room, his back turned. He was looking for her. Gertrude moved decisively in the other direction, down the stairs and towards the exit, until suddenly she heard a man crying for help. Risking escape and safety, she followed the cries over to the larder. Inside, Gertrude saw sacks of flour, a bloody butcher's block, and a pile of human skulls. She gagged, now horrified by her new understanding: the pie's secret ingredient. Gertrude found the man who was crying out and immediately began to untie him, and then stopped. There was now a knife held up to her face. It was the baker. "Do you remember this man?" asked the baker. Gertrude glanced at the tied-up man and had a shock of recognition. "Yes," said the baker. "It's the man with the feather cap who humiliated you. And now he's here, at your mercy." She recoiled at the baker's sinister invitation. "Even if he hurt me, nobody deserves this." "I see," said the baker. "But if you let him go, I'll still need meat from someone to make the pies. I can't keep up with demand, you see. It's either him or you." A week later, Gertrude's family began receiving parcels of silver delivered by messenger once per week. Over time, the farm began to flourish again and was doing better than ever. "I miss seeing Gertrude," Father said, "but because of all her hard work, the farm is safe. I just hope she's happy wherever she is." And to this day, they say you can get the tastiest pies in all of Ardenvale if you visit a little haunted inn run by a baker and his assistant. But whatever you do, don't stay for the night.
We all have bad habits. Mine is the kind you think you're doing so well without, and then you're out with friends and they're all reaching for their bad habits. And you feel that urge to not be left out, and you ask to borrow one of theirs. Well, what if I was to tell you there's a better alternative that helps you kick your bad habit in an enjoyable way? Something you can take out with you. Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses flavors. You get it. It makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code SCARY to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code SCARY or scan the QR code on screen to get a free gift with your order today.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.